Okay, I'm not really a fan of HEMA ratings, but I ended up kind of breaking the system this week. So here's some thoughts on the matter. So first off, why did I start doing this? Well, it was requested of me. So I run a provincial tournament called the Manitoba Highland Gathering. We get people from all over Canada that come to it, and one of the main requests is that I submit the results to HEMA ratings. So I started doing that. So looking through kind of the categories of it, it gave clear definitions of what could be submitted and what couldn't. So the main things being you had to have multiple clubs at the event, and the other thing being you had to have more than 10 participants. So looking at it, actually all of our local tournaments qualify for that. So not just the provincials, but also the local kind of city championships that we host every 10 weeks. What we've been doing for many years at our club is every 10 weeks we host a tournament, and we invite all of the clubs from the province, and it's actually open to anybody, so anybody that's in town visiting it. But we advertise it and we get everybody to come out and do a tournament on the weapon that we've been working on for that semester. And what we end up doing is tiering the tournament. So we have like a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced one. Part of the reason why is we still want a lot of the coaches and high-level competitors to compete and get a chance to practice for bigger tournaments. But the other reason is because it's less fun for beginners. It's really nice for them to compete with their peers, and then they get a chance to kind of see themselves gradually move up to the top and then bump into the next category. It's a positive experience for them versus if they're fencing the people that have maybe been coaching for 10 plus years all the time, or competing for 10 plus years. It tends to be a very discouraging experience, and they just get beaten up and upset. That's the reason why we tier them. So what that means is that the tournaments were a little bit smaller and had less opponents because I was only fencing the people that were at the top of it. So the toughest opponents from different clubs, whereas the beginners and the intermediates were kind of spared from that type of competition. What that ends up doing, and why I think there's a problem with HEMA ratings that I've definitely exposed, and I think it's actually been going on for a long time with a bunch of different players, if you look at each one of them individually, is that if you have a lot of successes against people in local tournaments or regional tournaments, it ends up really slanting that in your favor, especially if you go undefeated for a long period of time. So you might not be facing the best in the world or even mid-level guys, but if you have a really long undefeated winning streak, it pushes you up like way more than anticipated. I did not expect that any local tournament could push you up to the top, teens, and yet it did just in a few months of different tournaments. So when I'm bragging about this, I am very much joking. I'm really making fun of it because I think that it's not a great system. It's certainly not very good social currency for who is an authority on things like coaching or things like history. When we're talking about history, I think what you got to look for that is people with a PhD in history, and historians can advise you about history. And same thing with coaching. It should be people who have gone through coaching programs. Primarily for me, I think sport fencing coaching programs are essential for anybody, or ones that are developed through that lens. I think there's a lot you can gain from games type learning as well. So I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but I think it's a really good model to follow. So a little bit about my history. If my full history was on HEMA ratings, I would have an even more inflated score. And the reason why is if you go through the list of the top 100 saber fencers in Canada, I've beaten almost all of them and gone undefeated against almost all of them at several of the larger national tournaments. Now they're called national tournaments, and that's because it was designed as a national tournament that provinces would feed into, and more provinces are joining into that specific league. But that said, it has all of the top saber fencers in the steel saber category competing in it. So if you go down the list, like Laurent Thiel-Santerre, Matt Biondo, a bunch of the other ones, Zion Niles, they all competed at that event. So it ends up being a good representation of who the top is in Canada. Now, because I went undefeated in that league for at least 2 years in a row and have I have 5 gold medals and 1 silver from that competition specifically, it would look really, really inflated on a world level. So I don't think I should even be rated as a fencer. I don't think I should be rated internationally at all, because I've only competed locally and nationally in Canada. And I think that this really distorts the numbers, and it puts me at the top of a list where I'm not even competing internationally. You can't really compare me to anybody that's on the list, anybody else that's in that area, because most of them are international champions, right? Except for the 2 guys in the top 20 that I've beaten at the tournament, gone undefeated against in the category. So I would say that it's a broken system. It's not, and I'm not putting it down completely, because I think there's actually some value to it. Like, it is something, it is a record, it's a public record of it, right? But it's not everything, guys. And I think the point is that somebody who's entirely unknown in a small local scene can do like a ton of damage to the international ratings. And I wouldn't say that I damaged it intentionally whatsoever. It was more so I didn't know that it would push me that far. Like, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. But the other thing is that it can do a lot of damage and kind of skew the data a little bit. That said, as people have been saying, I'm planning on going to some international events this year is the plan. But it should regulate that a little bit. It should drop it back down, if I catch a loss. And we'll see. Like, it could be that I don't. Who knows, right? You can't really predict it until you're actually there. You can say who's better, who's more likely to win, but I think that's the point, is you can't really predict these things until it actually happens. So comparing people, fencers from different regions, is kind of apples to oranges, believe it or not. I will say this, and I'll continue to say this, is I think there are a ton of unrated fencers that have backgrounds in Olympic style fencing, kendo, and other martial arts that would absolutely trounce a lot of the people that are at the high levels of the game. Maybe not the top people. The top people are actually really, really good these days. It's changed a lot in the past, maybe 5 years. But that said, I think the whole world is going to be shaken up by this stuff, especially those that put too much stock into HEMA ratings. It's fallible, and I've demonstrated that. And I want to just state, I did not post those to demonstrate that point. But that said, I was requested to do it. It met the categories, and so the data is there, and it's legitimate data. So there you have it. I'm sure it won't last long. We'll see how it goes, guys. But I had to do an explanation of it, and I was definitely poking fun at it. I know to some people it's a really, really serious affair, and they take HEMA ratings very seriously. I personally don't. I find it really funny. You might not find it funny, and that's okay. We're going to have to just agree to disagree. But to me, this is actually really, really funny.